Welcome to Leominster Access Television and Neighborhood Snapshot, a series of interview programs focused on the historical neighborhoods of Leominster. During our program, our guests of today, the present time, through sharing their memories of the past, will create an historical record on videotape for the Leominsterites of tomorrow, the citizens of Leominster of the future. My name is Bob Saudelli. I am a member of the Leominster Historical Commission. Today we are pleased to welcome to the LATV studio Mrs. Nancy Buss Wheeler and her brother, Mr. William Buss. This is Bill's kid sister, Nancy, her baby sister, Nancy. And these are two individuals, two fine folks who attended the number 6 schoolhouse. Welcome to LATV and Neighborhood Snapshot, Nancy and Bill. You both attended the Little Red Schoolhouse, which is located on Upper Pleasant Street at the intersection of Pleasant, Union, and Wachusett Streets. One of the neighborhood signs is there, the number 6 schoolhouse. The number 6 schoolhouse neighborhood, what comprised it? What were its bounds generally? Bill, I'll direct that to you. What did the number 6 neighborhood include?
Well, we included the Pleasant Street to the Sterling line, and then it went up to Wachusett Street, way up there, and towards Leominster. It was, what was the street that goes down?
Manchester Street.
Manchester Street. And down to Union Street, the other.
So it consisted of a very, very large area of town. Where specifically did you kids grow up when you were children? Where was your homestead?
It was 807 Pleasant Street, and it's right at that time, it was a house before the number 6.
Number 6. So it's very, very close.
Yes.
To almost a stone's throw.
Yes.
To the schoolhouse. Today, the area for people who are new to Leominster, or even folks who grew up in Leominster, there are lots of houses, lots of streets off Pleasant Street, Union, side streets, housing developments, lots and lots of houses today. When you were children, what was the area like? Nancy,
It was all big farms. Everybody ran big farms.
Farms.
Yes,
and
all farm country, hay fields.
Hayfields, lots of woods.
Pretty much some woods.
Some
everybody
woods.
had
Some
woods,
woods,
yeah.
right? Mostly farms.
Mostly farms. There was a lot of open space. A lot of the woods today, or the woods that are left, probably were fields then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, because it doesn't take long for nature to the succession from, for forest to grow up, from field to forest. I think it's about 10 years or so that
like
scientifically, if it isn't mown and cut. We know where you grew up, the number 6 schoolhouse neighborhood. During what period in our country's history? Bill, you're the older of the siblings. During what years were you a child in the number 6 neighborhood?
Well, that would be through probably about 26.
1926. Now, you had told me in our little conversation before the interview that around 1919, that was World War I, you were about 6 years old?
Yes.
So, and then you'd started school about that time, so you were in the number 6 school about the World War I, end of World War I, that general time period.
Yes.
And Nancy, you being the youngest.
I started school in 1938, and that was the last set of classes in the building.
1938, just at the time, and you were a member of the final class of the one-room schoolhouse, the number 6 schoolhouse, which we'll get into more deeply later on in the interview. So we've set the where and the when. What was it like, things that we take for granted today in 2003? When you were a child, Bill, what was transportation like? Do you remember lots of cars, or what was it like?
Not too often you'd see a car. There was a man that had a pickup, well, a truck like a van would pick up, and when we got to going down to Bennett School and things like that.
But there weren't a lot of automobiles around.
No.
No. Was it horse and buggy?
Because
horse and wagon?
they delivered the mail to our house. It was a man with a buggy, a horse and buggy.
Horse and buggy.
He had two horses. He'd alternate the different horse, you know.
So he had his mail route was horse and buggy days.
Yes.
And Nancy, you remember you were older in the 30s, and there were more automobiles, but were there
Not that many.
still not a lot? So in Bill's day, they were rarities probably,
A little
but
bit more, but the doctor, I remember, came in a horse and buggy.
the doctor came,
Yeah.
made house calls. That's
Yes, yes,
a
yes,
change,
yes.
a contrast between then, now and then, and he came in a horse and buggy. The trolley cars, trackless, there wasn't a trolley line up Pleasant Street, because
No.
the number 6 neighborhood was really in the outskirts of
Yes.
town
Yes.
at the time, wasn't it? It was
Yes.
really, really rural. But downtown, there would have been the streetcars or the trolleys, trackless trolleys eventually, the buses and so on. Did you, as children, get to visit other neighborhoods very often, or did you pretty much stay within, because of transportation and so on, in the number 6 area? Bill?
Well, I know we'd visit my other grandparents in North Leominster. They lived on Tolman Avenue.
How would you get up to North Leominster from?
I don't realize how I did that.
But probably as a child, it wouldn't have been in an automobile.
No, I don't think so.
So you either had to carriage.
Well, I
or,
know that my grandparents had a horse and buggy, and they delivered milk with a milk cart with horse drawn.
Were the streets paved then? Pretty much.
Well, I
or
know
there
in front of 807 Pleasant Street, it was muddy in the spring,
So
and it was really a mess. They're clear down to Manchester Street.
that's quite a. So we're talking about horse and buggy days, and a number of the streets in town still not paved. I vaguely remember where I grew up in the 40s and 50s as a child, the little side street next to me, I have a recollection of that was dirt road. So even within that time, some of the side streets weren't paved. But
Yes.
some of the major thoroughfares, like from number 6 down to near Manchester, muddy at
Yes,
times.
yes.
So occasionally you would get to other parts of town.
Yes.
Nancy, when you
Mostly it was to visit relatives.
mostly to visit relatives. What about going downtown for things like shopping and things like that? Did much of that happen, or?
Periodically. I know Leominster stores are open on Thursday nights.
Thursday night traditionally in Leominster historically has been the pay night.
Right.
Yeah.
And Fitchburg, it used to, I guess it was, I'm not sure it was Wednesday or Friday. I think maybe Friday. Thursday night, Leominster. Friday night was the big night in town. I think Friday night for Fitchburg. Even I remember that as a Thursday night with big doings downtown Leominster. And that's changed because of the malls and the shopping centers. So that's a contrast between then and now. Was there a neighborhood market in the number 6 Schoolhouse neighborhood? I know that a number of the other neighborhoods did have the little mom and pop stores, but in the number 6 area, was there a little store?
No, I
The
don't.
nearest one was on Pleasant Street down near where Bennett School is now.
So that would have.
And then there was another one on Manchester Street, a small one too.
So am I correct that where Lane's Market is now?
Yes.
That would have been maybe the nearest little grocery store.
Yes.
So you had to be pretty much self-sufficient, and you went down only when you really needed
Yes.
something downtown to the stores, or for particular items. And today we think nothing of with the automobiles back and forth and 2 or 3 trips a day.
Right.
Today we live in an age of modern conveniences, cell phones, instant communication worldwide, central heating, air conditioning, washers, dryers, refrigerators, all kinds of stuff. What about then, Nancy, what about telephones?
We had an 8-party line.
So you did have a phone. Was it the...
It was the old...
was it...
The one that you set the hearing device inside along, and you talked into
on the
this.
hook, and you would have to call the operator?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You'd have to, through an operator?
Oh, yeah.
And an 8-party line,
Yes.
which must
Could
have
be.
been interesting
It
at
was.
times.
Kind of tied up periodically.
Yes, yes. What about things like we take for granted nice, warm, toasty houses today in the winter, and essentially, you know, you may have air conditioning in the summer, but in your family homestead, how did you heat the house? Because we're going way back.
We had wood stoves.
Wood stove.
And there was fireplaces in a couple of rooms, but we didn't use them too much. We did, but I mean, it was, the kitchen was the center.
That was the warmest
because that was
spot.
always warm.
And a big stove.
Big
Big kitchen
iron
queen.
stove.
Yeah.
Iron stove. Did it have the chrome?
Some, yes.
Some, yeah, because my grandparents had one of those, and it also burned coal, as I remember.
Yes, but we burnt
It was
wood.
dual. And did you have to do some wood chopping as a boy?
I don't remember that, probably, but I mean, you just took it as a part of life, you know.
That if you wanted to stay warm in the winter, you had to, and the chores, and a lot of chores that we don't see today.
That's right.
Everyone, you know, even the chores, many of the chores have changed. We talked about, now I know that lots of people, Nancy, you mentioned there were lots of clotheslines.
Yes.
Always. Yeah.
And there are still clotheslines, you know, the original solar dryers.
It works fine.
And it works fine. But today we have the laundromats, and we have the washer dryers at home and so on. But you said that you had kind of a special, your family had kind of a special arrangement for the washing because your dad had a horse and wagon, and he had a milk route because the farm had, you raised cows, and he sold the milk. And what would he do with the laundry?
He'd take it down to the laundry. It used to be right next to the brook that went before Cottage Street off of Pleasant Street.
And there was a laundry there.
Right,
and
laundry there.
So the week's laundry would, so that was kind of a, that was,
And they'd bring it back and,
so that was a help to your
my mother,
to your
yeah.
mom, a big help. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure she had plenty of
Oh, yes, yes.
of chores to do, plenty
Yes.
of work to do. Refrigeration. What was it? What was it then?
I don't remember the first of it but I know the time of the hurricane in what, 38, we had
1938.
ice box.
An icebox. Nancy, do you remember that? Wasn't it one of the chores to? I know my aunt
Empty
told
the water out from the
empty
bottom.
Yeah.
You had to do that regularly, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Oh,
it
yes.
would, that big block, that chunk of ice
Oh.
would, all that water would
Oh,
then
yeah, it would go all over the
overflow.
place, and you'd have words over it, you know.
Yeah. if a child didn't do that chore, because it made a
Sure.
mess. The other things about the shop canning, was there putting up preserves? Was a lot of that
A
done,
lot,
Nancy?
a lot. We canned everything, tomatoes, pickles, all kinds of vegetables.
Produce you
Oh,
grew?
yes.
Yes.
And so the canning season was a big
A big item.
And I remember my grandmother's, and my mother's too, used to do some canning, and I can remember the smell of tomatoes. It was
Oh, yeah.
still a wonderful smell of cooking and canning, and it was a big,
Oh, yeah.
and then you enjoyed those
Through the winter, yeah.
through the winter
We
Yes.
always stored potatoes and apples and
in the
in a coal cellar.
Which is a thing of the past, really, today.
Yes.
A wonderful thing. Generally, you know, these are things that people today, growing up, because everything, you know, we have the canned goods, and
Right.
there were canned goods then too,
yeah.
but pretty much lots of preserves.
Oh,
And
yeah.
preserving,
Yes.
preserving foods, canning was a big operation in the harvest season. Nancy, you had mentioned since it was difficult to get from place to place because there weren't a lot of cars and transportation wasn't so quick and readily available as today, there were salesmen, peddlers who came into the neighborhood. Could you tell us something about that, Nancy, and then I'll go to Bill.
We used to have the man came around that sold fish, and he had a horse and wagon, plenty of ice there. There would be a person that would come around and sell ice cream. I think he had an older truck, like maybe a Model T type thing, because he had, the refrigeration was bare basic stuff. Yeah. We also had somebody that came around to pick up rags and newspapers with a big team in a wagon. And
those would be recycled?
Yes.
So, we think recycling is something new.
It really isn't.
But it really isn't. No. And,
but he would have a set of scales with him that he would weigh everything on and pay you by the pound.
So recycling rags and newspapers and papers. What about any other peddlers? The Iceman, of course.
The Fishman.
The Fishman. Probably you didn't have to have the milkman come up because you had your own.
We had our own milk.
Your own milk. I know that some neighborhoods there would be someone coming around selling chickens. Did that happen up in your neighborhood, or did you grow your own chickens?
Yeah.
I think we pretty well did our own.
So you had your own. I remember some neighborhoods had a knife sharpener. A man would come around.
Oh, the tinker, yes, he'd come around
the tinker.
to
now,
repair pots, pans, sharpen things, And sometimes he had a little side business. You could get needles and pins and notions like that from him.
Was there someone who came around peddling home remedies and things of that sort?
Pretty much made up your own, or you called the doctor.
I see. Okay, so those are big contrasts between today, because we go to CVS or whatever, Walgreens, whatever the drugstores are, the supermarkets, here, there, everywhere. But they actually had peddlers coming in. Nowadays, you have people peddling things over the telephone.
Right.
Sometimes,
and calling it the telephone solicitation.
Right.
Calling especially when you're sitting down at mealtime, it seems. You didn't have to worry about that then. When you were growing up in Leominster, where did people in your neighborhood work? Where did they work? What did they do for work? Let me ask Bill.
Well, they had a shirt shop, and a comb shop, and let's see, and then in later years, Foster Grant was glasses and things.
Viscaloid, DuPont.
Viscaloid.
So some people would, the men, I imagine, would go down, some of them who weren't farming would perhaps have employment at one of the manufacturing establishments.
I would say more women than men.
The women later on. I think Nancy mentioned, or Bill mentioned in our little conversation, that someone in your family would go once a week and get work from the shirt shop and bring it home. Was that you, Bill? Who? That
was my aunt, my father's aunt, my great aunt, Bertha Bus.
And she would go to
She'd take the horse and buggy and go down and pick up, I think it was collars, and she had to turn them and fold them or something, probably press them, and take them back the next day.
So that was homework. It was a little cottage, as you said, Nancy, a little cottage industry. I do remember from another interview, or from a conversation about an interview, it wasn't here, that a gentleman from Lincoln Terrace said that, and he was a child, and there was the patent factory at the base of the terrace, and the kids used to, they'd give them bobby pins or something that they'd have to take the burrs off, and this work would be done at home. So and that was to supplement the family income.
Sure.
Because those were tough times in many ways, especially the Depression era.
Yes.
Bill, where you grew up, you went through that era. What about your parents and grandparents, your brother and sister here? What did your parents do? They worked very hard, I know, but
Yes, my father he worked with his father, but he did it when we first married. I believe he went to Framingham and
by the
worked
way,
in a greenhouse.
your wife Ruth, your beautiful wife Ruth, is sitting in the monitor room and is watching this. Your wife of how many years? 63. 63 years, so she's watching all of this.
Yes,
So,
yes.
So your dad worked
With his father on the farm. He came back from Framingham, where he worked in greenhouses there, and he worked with the Wheeler's greenhouse over on Prospect Street for a while, and then he went back with his father.
There were at that time there was lots of major greenhouses in Leominster.
Yes,
Were there at
yes.
that time, and they were growing produce for locally and for
And plants,
plants,
flowering plants.
And I think at one time in Leominster they even shipped things to the Boston
Yes.
market. I think we were the cucumber capital of the area. I remember reading that someplace.
It could be.
What about your mom, Nancy? What did?
My mother, when I was little, began working, and she ended up working for Cluett Peabody, sewing shirts.
That is the, and plus raising
Family.
the family, rearing the family, which is still.
I was lucky I had the
major-
benefit of all my brothers and sisters to help me.
Bill, when you grew up, what did you do for a living? You're retired now, of course, but what
Yeah.
did you do?
Well, I worked with my grandfather delivering milk. I deliver the milk and work on the farm. And very early in life, the mailman said one day they're having an exam for postal employees, and he says, "Bill, you're old enough, why don't you go down and sign up?" So I did, and I took the exam, and I believe I was second on the list of men. So I got a job right off,
The United States Postal Service
Yeah.
as a Leominster mailman.
Yeah.
And you had that occupation for many, many, many years.
Yes, 30-something.
37 years. And where was your route? First of all, did you drive around or did you walk the road?
No, I used to go take the bus down to Lancaster Street, and then I get off down at the end of, well, not Lancaster Street, well, the Viscoid, and work back and go up over Lincoln Terrace. And it was only a 4-hour route at that time, and then as time went on, I used to cover a different route each day.
And so you went to
I
different
got more-
sections of
I got
Leominster.
more money for doing 5 routes a week instead
see.
of staying on one.
And then you delivered mail in that neighborhood, and then you delivered mail on the west side for a long time,
Yes.
too. I remember as a child, mail deliveries twice a day. The mailman would come twice a day, so you'd have morning delivery and an afternoon delivery. Now, that's a thing of the past.
Yes.
Of course, during your time as a mailman, there were 2 deliveries, right?
Yes, but your afternoon delivery was very short because you didn't have that much work, so you'd cover practically the same route,
Same
but
route,
you didn't
but-
have the pieces of mail to deliver, that many.
There wasn't all the junk mail that
No,
we have
no,
today.
there wasn't.
This is
No,
a big
no.
contrast, I'm sure,
Yeah.
between then and
Yes.
now. I can remember as a kid sending away things on cereal, little things for cereal, and waiting and checking, being impatient.
Sure.
I had to learn, that's one of the things I think that taught me patience. You had to wait and wait and wait for the little gadget or little thing you sent away for.
Sure.
So I'd check that mailbox, and I guess they'd come twice a day. There were a lot more mailboxes around then,
Yes,
I remember, and that's a change. And this is the age of the 37-cent stamp for a first-class delivery, and it will be raised eventually. In your day, what was a first-class letter? Would be the 3 cent?
I think it was 6 or 7 cents. something like
yeah.
that.
Uh,
So far back, it's hard to
it's
recall,
hard to
actually.
recall. It may have even been
To May 3rd?
may have even been the 3 when
Yeah,
you first
I think
started,
it
because
could
I
be.
vaguely remember 3
3
postage
cents for
stamps, 3
first
cents, and then
class,
they
yeah.
just
Yeah,
they have risen significantly,
Yeah.
and it's necessary because of the the inflation and costs and so on. And Nancy, what did you do for a living?
I got married and raised a family,
9 children?
yes.
So you were very, very busy raising that family, taking care of those
And then
children.
when I turned
Very hard
45,
work.
I went to get my nursing degree, so I ended up in nursing.
So you became a nurse after your family was brought up. As children, you attended the Little Red Schoolhouse, the number 6 schoolhouse. Big change. Today we have, the schools are larger, they're configured differently. We have the elementary, and then we have perhaps junior high schools are pretty much not called that anymore. The philosophy has changed. They're middle schools. We have the high school and so on. But as children, you attended the Little Red Schoolhouse, the number 6. What was it like? Now, we'll start with Bill because, Bill, you attended, being older, you attended before
yes,
Nancy.
yes.
What were the grades when you
1
attended?
through 6 usually.
1 through 6. And the desks were all
Lined up.
fastened to the floor.
Subject to change.
Subject to change. When I was in elementary school, I was at the era where the desks, when I first started, the desks were still fastened, bolted to the floor, and then the UN was just coming in, and it was a big deal in 6th grade that we got movable furniture, and I
Yes.
think we arranged them the way the United Nations, the General Assembly, that was a big thing, so movable furniture. But the days of the blackboard, the days of the one-room schoolhouse, reading, writing, arithmetic, what were the 3 R's? Were there any other subjects, Nancy?
We had geography and history and
Geography and history?
and local government called civics.
Civics, which was a study of the local government.
Yeah, how it ran and
Now, Nancy, Bill, you attended 1919, that's when you, approximately when you were
Yes.
a little kid there, entering
Yes.
the school for 6th grades, and Nancy, you were there just before World War II,
Right.
in the 30s. You were, in fact, you were a member of the last class that graduated
yes,
from,
that's correct.
and when you were there, they had up through grade
Grade 8.
8. And interestingly, you both had
The
the same
thing.
wonderful teacher.
Yes.
And I have a commemorative book, the number 6 Little Red Schoolhouse, Leominster, Massachusetts. It was produced a number of years ago. And I'm looking at they have the chronology, the list of teachers, and it says here that in 1907, a teacher named Elsie Powers was the teacher for the year 1907. And it says Elsie Powers, Elsie Powers, Elsie Powers, all the way up. 1930, she became Elsie Powers Fisher. And in 1939, Mrs. Powers, Mrs. Elsie W. Powers Fisher, was still teaching there, and it says she went on after her career at the number 6. She taught for 32 years at number 6, and then she was transferred to Spruce Street School in 1939, and she passed away in 1945. So she was a teacher with lots of longevity from 1907 at the number 6 to 1939, and she sounded, from what you've told me, and what I've heard, she was a wonderful, warm
Yes.
person, and a wonderful, sweet lady, and a wonderful teacher. Did so many other things, like making cocoa on cold
If
winters.
it was a bitter day and the snow was blowing and stuff, she'd put on a little pot of cocoa before we went home so we wouldn't catch cold.
Which was a wonderful
It was.
thing.
Something very different.
Something very different. All the teachers are warm and loving to their children, we hope, today. But this was a different atmosphere because it was a one-room schoolhouse where you had kids from eventually grades 1 through 8
Right.
in the same classroom. So how, as a teacher, did she, she had to deal with all those individual differences, but she did it.
She did it very well.
She did it very, very well. Bill, you said something, and Nancy, about the famous stove that heated that number 6 schoolhouse, and
Yes.
it's still there today.
Yes.
And,
It's been repaired many times, and it's located down near the front of the school, and it goes up a flue, and the flue goes all the way back to the chimney at the end of
right,
the
so
building.
So the chimney is, the flue is exposed
Yes.
to gain the benefit of the heat, so
Yes.
that, and it's suspended from the tin ceiling
Yes,
by,
right.
by
Yes.
wires, but that actually heats the whole building, a wood
Yes.
stove. And it's still used today, because the number 6 schoolhouse, which is no longer a schoolhouse, the Little Red Schoolhouse, is still a very active number 6 community center.
Yes.
Right.
And it's still used for community events, and it can be rented, and there's an association, a very active association. So it's still that is actually according to this book, the present number 6 schoolhouse is the 3rd one
Yes.
on the site. I'm quoting from this commemorative book. In 1767, the first school was built on this site. In 1792, the school was replaced by a larger building. And in 1851, the present school, which is there now, what we know as the Little Red Schoolhouse, the present one was built. And it has served well through the years. Tell us something else about, I used to, when I went to Lincoln School, I used to be able to walk. I lived on Central Street, so I used to be able to, 166, I used to be able to walk home from lunch, to lunch, back and forth, to lunch, walk to school in the morning, walk home for lunch, watch Big Brother Bob Emery on the on the TV at the time, and he'd salute to the president, who was Eisenhower. I can still remember President Eisenhower. He'd lift a glass of milk or something to the president, and I'd go back for the afternoon session. Both of you were able to go home for lunch.
Yes.
Yes.
Because you lived a stone's throw
Right.
from
From the
the
school.
school. What did the other children do who came from the outskirts of the number 6 neighborhood?
They'd bring their lunch.
They'd bring the bag lunch.
Actually,
Wasn't it?
a metal pail.
Metal pail, lunch
Yeah.
pail.
Oh,
I say
yeah.
bag lunch was my era, but a metal pail,
Right.
a lunchbox
With a cover.
with a cover. And it probably wasn't the modern lunch boxes that we see are all decorated. These were
Kind of round.
a round lunch pail.
Yeah.
Literally a lunch
Lunch
pail. Lunch bucket.
Right.
You had the traditional school subjects. Today, children have the benefit of an art teacher, we hope, and a music teacher, and although in this era of reduced taxes and so on, some of these very important subjects, essential subjects, are being cut back. But in those days, you did have Mrs. Powers, who would play the piano. And you said something about she would move the piano every once in a while,
yes,
this big
yes.
upright piano.
There was a big, four, had 4 posts, and it would roll.
Would you have some of the husky boys help her out, probably?
Yes, but I think she could move it somewhere.
move it herself.
But it was a big piano,
So you'd have music.
casters on it.
Nancy, you said there was a music specialist, a music teacher who would come once a week
Yes.
Up,
Yeah, up from Bennett School.
up from Bennett School. Now, Bill, do you remember that? Because this was prior, so this
I
was...
may remember it as happening later, I don't
Later
know, but
on.
I know that she came up.
She would come up. You would recite the pledge. Would you have a song? Would you sing
Either God Bless America or the National Anthem.
national anthem or God Bless America? What about artwork? And another important subject. Did Mrs. Powers, Mrs. Fisher, then Mrs. Powers, the same lady, her maiden name was Fisher, did she do lots of arts and crafts with you? Did you do lots of artwork, seasonal things?
Seasonal and presidents' birthdays. You did your silhouettes and put them on white paper, and For Thanksgiving, you made up probably maybe pilgrims and turkeys and pasted them on paper.
So the traditional holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Columbus Day perhaps?
Oh, yeah, I think we did a ship or something that way.
The holidays and the seasons, you recognize
Right.
those,
Yeah.
which isn't always done today because of constitutional issues
Right.
and various other issues, sadly. It sounds like it was a really special, wonderful, warm learning experience.
It was. It really was.
A privilege being at the number 6 schoolhouse during your
It
years.
really was.
Now, Bill, when you left 6th grade, you went to
Bennett.
And Nancy, when you left 8th grade from the number 6,
When I
you
left the first grade, I went to the 2nd grade down to Bennett.
went to Bennett.
Right.
So that's where that was the accepting school
Right.
from, and you were in the last class in 1930.
38.
No.
38,
39.
so you were a
38, yeah.
what grade?
First grade.
First grader. And I saw in this commemorative book, there's a picture of the last class.
Yes. Mhm.
And they have the last class, and you are in there with 1939, the last class at number 6 school, and it's if we can't show show it on camera, but I see some other I see John Chury, I see some other people, B. Hardy, and some other people that and which little girl are you here?
I'm right here in the front row.
You're the little girl in the front
Right.
row with a bow in her hair. Okay,
Long time ago.
a long time ago. So warm memories of the number 6 school. Recess at school, what was it like? I know there's some playground equipment up there. It's been up there for years. There's a slide, and there was a little merry-go-round.
Yes.
But what did you kids do at recess? What did the
Oh,
boys
they play ball or something like that.
toss a ball around?
Yeah.
Now there are houses built in the field, but was there a little open area where you could play?
Yes.
Playground area?
We played a lot of games that are now forbidden, like Red Rover Come Over and all those things that damage giraffes somewhat.
Oh, Red Rover, come.
And London Bridges, the girls played London Bridges a lot.
And those kids had to, because there was a mixture of ages from eventually 1 through 8, you had to,
Be
really,
careful about your sides.
you had to be careful about your size.
Sure.
And, but you also had to, there must have been a lot of, there had to be a lot of cooperation and caring for each other and consideration, I would think.
The older ones were always careful that the little ones didn't get hurt or get too cold or that kind of thing. Yeah.
So it sounds like it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Recess reminds me, and I fun. What I want to ask you, what did you kids do for entertainment, for fun? Not necessarily in school, but out of school. What was playtime like? I know that, Nancy, you said that you had
I
a
played with dolls. I had a nice
doll
doll
collection.
and a wicker carriage.
A wicker carriage.
I also had a cat I could dress up as a doll and run her around.
You dressed your cat
Yes.
up as a doll to run around? Okay, and Bill?
I know that as soon as I can remember going up to my grandfather's farm and helping with his chores and anything. They used to have to pick raspberries in season, peaches in the fall, and apples.
So it was work, but it was also probably fun because you were learning responsibility, and
Yes,
it was a
yes.
big deal to help your grandpa probably,
Yes.
and your dad and your grandpa. I have a note here about winter sliding, double runners, and Wachusett Street. What can you tell me about that, Bill?
Well, I know my father had a big double runner,
Sled.
and we'd pull it up Wachusett Street to the second hill beyond the reservoir, and we'd come down some nights.
Up by the golf, where the golf course would be, up as
Yes,
far?
yeah. Some nights you'd come down just once because it takes so long to go back up. You'd slide clear down to where the church is on the Union Street.
The Holy
now was
Family
a
Church.
town poor farm.
Used to be the city infirmary, the poor farm.
We'd go that far.
From all the way up there, all the way right across
and
the
boy,
intersection.
You would fly.
That's quite from an elevation, a drop in elevation.
I would think it'd be, what, a couple miles?
A good distance, and you didn't worry about cars coming along the road, or did you have a lookout?
It got to be so you had to watch and
Eventually, as
limit it. You wouldn't do that many times.
No. What about other things now? We have cinemas today, and we have TV and all kinds of, we can go here, there, everywhere. In a day, we can be 100 miles away from home going to some event with modern transportation. In those days, what was Sunday afternoon like, the very quiet Sunday afternoons? We talked a little about this.
We used to go for long walks on the nice Sunday afternoons.
Nice weather, nice long walks, not a 5-mile walk wasn't
Sometimes.
out of the
Something like that.
out of the ordinary.
Not really.
It would be a nice leisurely walk after
Sunday dinner.
After
yeah.
Sunday dinner, which probably was a big event then. Sunday
That was the
dinner.
roast chicken day.
That was a special, very, very special meal, the Sunday meal. But lots of walking in those days, lots of walking. And it didn't do anybody any harm. Nice leisurely afternoon walks, relaxing. It sounds very,
Yes,
very...
it was.
A slower pace.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
A simpler, slower, but very, very, really sounds very, very nice. Is there any one major event or happening in Leominster's history or the nation's history that especially stands out in your memory? Let me direct this first to Nancy.
Yes, December 7th.
December 7th, Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor Day.
The Japanese
It was a very
bombing of-
nice Sunday afternoon, mild, and we had a rose bush out front of 807 that had a late blossom or two, and my sisters and I were out there looking at it and marveling that it was that late, and my mother called from the window, "Something's going on, you better come in and listen to the radio." And nothing was ever the same since.
Nothing since that time.
Right.
That was our...
Cutting our teeth time.
Right, it's in a way, December 7th, 1942, history changed. December 7th, 1941. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor Day, and November 11th, 2001.
Right.
Our history changed too.
Right.
So,
It also happens to be his birthday,
which
December 7th.
well, happy birthday, Pearl. That's you never forget that day.
The two go together.
The two go together. Bill, any particular event? And by the way, Nancy, you heard the news over the radio.
Yes.
Bill, are there any events?
Well, I remember when the electricity went up Pleasant Street up beyond to the Sterling line, and my grandmother and grandfather had electricity,
That was a big...
and she had a radio.
Wow.
We didn't have a radio.
So you remember before there was electricity,
Yes, yes.
Okay,
In fact, we had kerosene lamps
kerosene
for quite
lamps.
a while.
And so as you got a little older, then electricity
Electric
came
came
in,
in.
which was a electrification, a
Yes,
marvelous
yes,
thing.
yes.
And then your grandparents had a radio,
Yes,
so you remember when radio
Yes.
first came in.
yeah.
Amazing.
It just, you can't picture now not having some way of, like a radio or TV or something like that.
So, Bill, we can say that you went from a time when horse and buggies were not unusual to the space age, where we have
That's
people
right.
orbiting
That's
the
right.
Earth. We have orbiting space stations. So amazing. Over a relatively short period of time
Yes, yes.
in history, the changes
That's
that
right.
have taken place. Nancy, you mentioned something about the memorable parades downtown in
Oh,
Leominster?
the Memorial Day parades here in town used to be fabulous. You always got dressed up in white. The whole family went. You wore a flower denoting if your parents were alive or dead. Generally, it was a little carnation of type flower thing.
So,
And I remember seeing Civil War veterans marching.
so as a child, you remember
There were
the
big
Memorial Day parades,
yes.
very large parades.
Oh,
and they
yes.
were
The whole town
big
turned
events.
Turned out for
Yes.
that.
And you even remember some of the Civil War,
Yeah.
the remaining Civil
Right.
War veterans.
Yes.
They must have really been very, very elderly at that
Yes,
time.
but they managed to
they
walk.
managed to walk.
Right.
The GAR, the Grand Army of
Yeah.
the Republic vets. Very, very interesting. So the connections,
They even had patriotic floats made up.
patriotic floats, and parades. As you look at some of the historical, my work on the commission, and being interested in some of these old pictures of Leominster, you do come across pictures of parades, and they were really big events.
Oh, yeah.
Really big events in
Yes.
those days. Wonderful events to
were.
celebrate events in Leominster's history or the nation's
Right.
history.
Yes.
With other interviewees, a big, and I can see why it's burned in people's memories, is the 1938 hurricane.
Oh, yes.
What can you tell us about that? Bill, what do you remember?
Well, I remember we had to go and get ice. It wouldn't be delivered. And it was just, of course, we had kerosene lamps for a long time anyway. We eventually had electricity where we rented the Mayo place.
Why wasn't now, you had to go get ice because for the refrigeration of food and so on, but why did the ice deliveries stop?
I have no idea.
Was it because, I imagine,
We had got a
Because
refrigerator.
Barrett's had the ice plant on Chestnut Street at that
And
time,
were there-
and you could pick it up.
and were there lots of trees blown down across the
Pleasant Street.
the
yeah.
roads were probably
Yes.
impassable
Very much.
for a while. Nancy, what do you remember about the hurricane?
Well, I was home with my two sisters because Bill and my mother had gone down to Grange meeting in town, and power went off, and one of the windows got broken, and one sister was outside trying to put something in the window, and my sister inside trying to put something against it, and it just blew my sister's hair that was outside and a huge halo around her head. And we all slept together in the living room, and it blew slates off the roof, and big trees in the backyard came down like little twigs, and it was unforgettable.
It
really
was unforgettable. It was one of the worst disasters
Yes, it
in New
was.
England's history. Today, of course, we have an advance warning because of the weather,
Right. System.
science of
Good.
weather prediction, but it was a surprise
It was.
then. Just before we conclude this interview, I have to ask, because I made a note about this, Nancy, and it refers to the Memorial Day Parade. What was the incident with the braids?
Oh, the braids. Across,
You were a little girl.
yeah, beside the church was a big Victorian house with a large front lawn and a metal picket fence. And we were waiting for a unit of the parade to assemble. And of course, you're all agog because it's a day out, a day in town. It's wonderful. Somebody tied my braids to one of the pickets, and I nearly took my hair off getting away from it. Unforgettable, another one.
All these memories, even now in the light of time has passed, even that probably is a fond memory.
It's a mellow, yeah.
It mellows with time. This has been an interesting interview, and your recollections of your childhood and your reminiscences of the number 6 attending, having the honor, the privilege, the good fortune of being able to attend a one-room schoolhouse. I thank you very, very much, Mrs. Nancy Buss Wheeler, and Mr. William Buss, Nancy and Bill, I thank you very, very much for sharing your fine recollections with us, with the citizens of Leominster, for our historical record, your memories of growing up in the number 6 Schoolhouse neighborhood. And I also wish to thank the listening audience, the viewing audience, for their attention. Thank you very much.